Our next lesson in the Civil War is called Chancellorsville. But first, let's review a little bit. What was the biggest mistake made by the Confederates that helped the Union get a victory at Shiloh? Stacking Confederate forces one behind the other, which did not allow them to all attack at once. At the Hornet's Nest, Grant informed the commanders that they were to hold that position for as long as possible. Why is it so important that they were able to do this? It gave Grant time to set up a defensive position in that location. What took place that quite possibly saved Grant from defeat at Shiloh? The Union soldiers fought very well. Buell arrived with reinforcements after the first day of battle, and General Prentiss was able to hold on to his position in the Hornet's Nest. Why did the Battle of Shiloh come about? The Union was looking to gain control of Corinth, which was 30 miles away. What was a myth that would be put to rest after Shiloh? One rebel was worth 10 Yankee soldiers. Why did General Johnson want to attack Grant? His troops outnumbered Grant's, which would give him an advantage. He would have the element of surprise on his side. It has been said the Battle of Shiloh was an eye-opening event for people of the North and the South, a sort of wake-up call. Why would this be true? Okay. No one was expecting that there would be such a tremendous loss of life. It showed that both sides were willing to fight, and it put an end to the idea that this was going to be a short war. So if you said any of those. How did Pittsburgh Landing fit into the Northern strategy in fighting the war? The Union wanted to gain control of the tributaries that flowed into the Mississippi River. Why was Corinth such an important target for the Union? It was a major railway center. I'm going to say a definition. I want you to tell me which word I'm referring to. The most common or greatest number or amount is predominant. A wall, ditch, or rampart built in order to strengthen a place's defenses. Fortification. An attack made in response to one made by an enemy. Counterattack. An organized attempt to prevent goods from entering or leaving a region. A blockade. A temporary government pending approval of others. Provisional. The left or right side of a military formation. A flank. A narrow piece of land that juts out from the mainland into a body of water. A peninsula. The group from Missouri that practiced guerrilla warfare and sympathized with the South was called bushwhackers. The last battle of the Civil War was fought near what town? Brownville, Texas. What event led to the bloodshed in Missouri after it had declared itself neutral in the war? Nathaniel Lyon seized an arsenal for the North. Why did General McClellan lose the trust of his political superiors in early 1862? They felt he did not support the war and could be a traitor. Why was McClellan's campaign unsuccessful despite his numerical advantage? The South never had to face the full brunt of the Union forces. True or false? The Arizona-New Mexico Territory was renamed the Confederate Territory of Arizona after the South defeated the Union there. True. What were the names of the 3 Confederate generals that won the Second Battle of Bull Run? Longstreet, Lee, and Jackson. What issue constantly plagued Lincoln as the war progressed? Finding a general who would be aggressive and win the war. Alright, our lesson today is called Chancellorsville. Our objectives are to cite the circumstances and results of the Battle of Chancellorsville, to know the impact the battle had on both sides, and to recognize what the loss of Stonewall Jackson meant to the South. To rise through the ranks to a higher rank or status is to ascend. An attempt to keep supplies or people from entering or leaving a place is a blockade. Something that provides energy or motivation to accomplish something or to undertake something is, let me make sure I'm saying this right, impetus. The power to increase or develop at an ever-growing pace is momentum. Okay, the comic at the top of the page. Oh no, not again. Face it, Chuck. You just don't have much imagination. Appearances are often deceiving, by Aesop. Do you ever watch the evening news on a regular basis? Or do you constantly read the newspaper? Many times both are filled with bad news. Someone died here, someone else was killed over there. One store was robbed on the east side of town. At the same time, another caught on fire. A bad car accident closed the freeway for a while. You get the idea. It can actually be pretty depressing. However, appearances can be deceiving. The world is full of good news. Random acts of kindness fill the streets of every city in the nation. There are many people who think of others before themselves on a regular basis. Things are not always as they appear on the surface. To get at the truth of the matter requires a little digging and prodding beyond what you see and hear. On the surface, it appeared to Northern folk that the Civil War was going very badly for them. The Peninsula Campaign turned out to be a disaster. The Second Battle of Bull Run was worse. Antietam was a draw, but was quickly followed by the mess at Fredericksburg. Was there no good news? Appearances are deceiving indeed. There were a lot of things going well for the North in the background. As the spring of 1863 approached, and despite earlier disasters, The Union was tightening its grip on the war. Its army continued to menace Tennessee. Grant was slowly gaining control of Vicksburg, the last Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi. The Union blockade of southern ports was slowly strangling the South, keeping them from getting badly needed supplies from Europe. Despite the positive events, many people in the North felt things were not going well at all. It really was hard for them to see the sun on the other side of those dark clouds. Unfortunately for them, the storm was going to get worse for a bit longer. Okay, so go ahead and get your notes. I want you to skip a space and go ahead and write today's date. Today we're going to talk about Chancellorsville. In reality, the war was not going all that well for the South. Yes, General Lee had won some impressive victories. However, he had to deal with a manpower shortage that was only getting worse as the war went on. He was looking for one giant victory that could somehow seal the fate of the Union Army. As 1863 rolled around, hope was renewed, and the result of Lee's greatest victory of the war at Chancellorsville. The momentum he gained there provided the impetus for the Confederacy's final attempt at invading the North. New leadership again for the Union. After Fredericksburg, Lincoln wasted no time in replacing his commander. General Ambrose Burnside was removed, and General Joseph Hooker ascended to the command of the Army of the Potomac. Okay. So now, Union General Joseph Hooker was the commander of the Army of the Potomac. Let's try this one. Commander of the Army of Potomac. I keep saying Potomac, which it might be Potomac. Sorry. Hooker spent much of the winter reorganizing and rebuilding the Northern Army. Under his leadership, Northern cavalry units became much improved, and the confidence of the Army, both in themselves and in their leadership, grew. When April arrived, Hooker was anxious to begin a new offensive on the Confederate capital of Richmond. He was extremely confident that his plan of action was strategically sound. As seemed to be the common factor with Union commanders, though, his ability to carry it out was another matter. Hooker's plan, despite having an overwhelming advantage in manpower, 120,000 men to Lee's 60,000, Hooker had no intention of diving headfirst into Lee's defenses. The Confederates were still in Fredericksburg, waiting for some kind of movement from the Union troops, and Hooker remembered well what had happened to his men the previous December. He wanted to make Lee think that he might attack there again. Hooker decided to keep a third of his army in front of Fredericksburg. Okay, so Hooker has 120,000 men. So Hooker has 120,000 men. Lee has 60,000. Confederate. Lee has 60,000. Okay. So the Union has twice as many men as Lee. Okay. So it says what he's going to do. He's trying to trick Lee. He's trying to trick Robert E. Lee. to thinking that they might attack there again. So Hooker decided to keep a third of his army in front of Fredericksburg and move the rest 25 miles upriver to cross the Rappahannock there. It was his plan to attack the rebels on their left flank. So he's keeping a third of his army in front of Fredericksburg. Union Hooker. A third of army in front of Fredericksburg. Okay, the rest of his army, which is going to be 2/3, is going to go 25 miles upriver and cross the Rappahannock River. Go 25 miles upriver and cross, okay, R-A-P-P-A. Rappahannock, that's an A, by the way. And cross the Rappahannock River, and he was going to attack them on their left flank. Attack left flank. Okay, this is his plan. Okay. He hoped this move would cause Lee to retreat towards Richmond by cutting his supply lines and lines of communication with the rebel capital. This would force a battle on the ground of the Union's choosing, somewhere around the area of Chancellorsville. Okay, so we have a new general in command again, General Joseph Hooker. He's the commander of the Army of the Potomac. Union Hooker has 120,000 men. Lee has 60,000. Hooker's plan is to keep a third of his army in front of Fredericksburg, and this is basically to trick Lee into thinking that they're going to attack there. And he's going to send 2,000 25 miles upriver to cross the Rappahannock River, and then he's going to attack Lee's left flank. This is his plan. Okay. And he's wanting Lee to retreat toward Richmond. Okay, he wants Lee to retreat toward Richmond, you know, their capital. Okay. The battle plans were sound and should have worked. The problem, as it turned out, was that Lee did not react as Hooker thought. Rather than retreating to Richmond and protecting his line of communication and supplies, he attacked. Okay. So Lee didn't retreat. Lee left 15,000 men in Fredericksburg and split his remaining 45,000 into 3 armies. Which is, okay, so he has 4 armies of 15,000 men. To split your army in the face of an enemy who had a great numerical advantage was unwise. To attack with an inferior army on top of that was unheard of in modern warfare. It was a tremendous gamble, but it worked perfectly. So, Lee didn't retreat. He attacked. Okay. So Hooker's response to Lee. Hooker's plan was to stay on the defense and force Lee to attack. Lee decided to go along with the attack, but added an unexpected twist. He split up his army even further and had Stonewall Jackson march around to the Union right flank. He attacked Confederate Lee split his army he had Stonewall Jackson marched around to the Union right flank. Okay. Once again, it was here that Union miscommunication proved costly. Part of Hooker's army was supposed to attack Fredericksburg a few miles away, while another part was to disrupt Confederate supply lines. Neither of these had occurred by the morning of May 2nd, when General Jackson slammed into Hooker's right flank with 26,000 men, driving the Union into a rout. Okay. Okay. So the Union Hooker. Okay. Part was supposed to attack Fredericksburg. Okay. The other part was supposed to disrupt the Confederate supply lines. Part was to disrupt Confederate supply lines. Okay. This is what was supposed to be going on. Neither of these had occurred in the morning of May 2nd, when General Jackson slammed into Hooker's right flank with 26,000 men. So neither happened. Neither happened. Okay. So Stonewall Jackson marched around and is attacking the Union's right flank, and it says with 26,000 men. With 26,000 men. Okay. So, Hooker wanted Lee to retreat toward Richmond, but Lee didn't retreat, he attacked. Confederate, Robert E. Lee split his army. He's having Stonewall Jackson march around to the Union right flank with 26,000 men. Now, Hooker, part of his army is supposed to attack Fredericksburg, and part of it was to disrupt the Confederate supply lines. Well, neither of these happened. Okay? So Stonewall is attacking the right flank. 3 days of fierce fighting followed, with the Union Army being driven back across the Rappahannock River. By May 5th, Hooker's army was in total disarray and forced to abandon the battle. Okay. So they fought for 3 days. And basically Hooker retreated. Impact of the Union. For the second battle in a row, Union military leadership had failed miserably. The North seemed to have every advantage they could possibly have, except for the thing they needed most, leadership. Robert E. Lee seemed unbeatable. He and Jackson were now becoming world famous for their ability to lead an ill-supplied and outnumbered army to one victory after another. The anti-war sentiment in the North now became more vocal than ever before. As Commander-in-Chief of Union forces, President Lincoln bore the brunt of another loss. Once again, he was forced to respond by replacing another commander, which he did a short time later. Even though another loss had staggered morale, things were not as they appeared on the surface. The South has the momentum. This victory at Chancellorsville lifted Southern spirits to new heights. However, like a tree that appears healthy on the outside but is rotting on the inside, the Confederacy was not as strong as it appeared. Two major negative factors blunted this great triumph. Okay. During the battle, Stonewall Jackson was wounded. As he scouted enemy positions after the battle's first day, he was mistaken for a Union officer and shot by his own troops. So Confederate Stonewall Jackson he was shot by his own troops. The wound required that his arm be amputated, and he died a few days later after contracting pneumonia. Okay, so they had to amputate his arm. He died a few days later after contracting pneumonia. The loss of such a great military commander would cost Lee and the Southern Army dearly. Even though Union losses were much higher than Confederate, the South did not have the manpower to replace those lost in battle. This second issue was to have a telling effect on the war as it continued. With the exception of Gettysburg, which was just around the corner, each battle saw fewer and fewer Confederate troops engaged, whereas Union forces increased. Okay, the South didn't have manpower for replacements. That meant if somebody died in the battle, they couldn't replace them. They couldn't just bring in more troops. Nevertheless, Lee proposed at this time one last invasion on the North. Knowing the South's opportunity to win was disappearing fast, he felt this was the final chance for total victory and an end to the war. With so much discord in Congress, a Confederate victory on Northern territory might force an end to hostilities. This turning point of the Civil War was soon to take place near a little town in Pennsylvania, Gettysburg. Let's review. Before completing the problem set, make sure you understand the main points of this lesson. After the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lincoln replaced Burnside with Joseph Hooker. Hooker's planned to defeat the South at Chancellorsville by forcing Lee's army to attack his superior force, which Lee did. Lee unexpectedly split his smaller force into pieces and attacked Hooker from the right flank, routing the Union army. To the north, this was another major loss to an inferior force. Calls to end the war became stronger than ever. It appeared the North was losing the war. There were two major problems, however, that would have a direct impact on the war's outcome. General Stonewall Jackson was accidentally killed by his own men during the Battle of Chancellorsville. Unlike the North, the South did not have the manpower to replace those killed and wounded in battle. As a result, Union forces continued to get larger while Southern forces became smaller. General Lee devised one more invasion of the North. He hoped a Confederate victory on Northern soil would force Congress to call an end to the Civil War. Okay, make sure you study this lesson, study your notes, study your previous quizzes, and go ahead and answer the questions.